everybody. Welcome to ABA Inside Track, the podcast that's like reading in your car, but safer. I'm your host, Robert Perry Cruz, and with me, as always, are my fabulous co-hosts.
Hello, Rob. It's me, Diana Perry Cruz.
And it's me, Jackie Not Perry Cruz.
Do you want to say what your last name is?
No, I'm just kidding. Jackie McDonald. Good to be here.
When we incorporated our podcast company, we made Jackie legally change her name to Not Perry Cruz. So
Jackie Not Perry Cruz, so everyone knows that we're not married.
It rolls off the tongue.
It does. It's the only thing in the emails that people are like, "Who's married to Rob?"
No, it's the question everyone wants to know. I think that was one of our notes in the pod. It's like, this episode you finally learned, because I think eventually we said it. But this isn't a podcast about who is married to whom, or direct object preposition usage. This is a podcast about behavior analysis and behavior analytic research, where every week we pick a topic and discuss some relevant research articles. And if you are listening to this in the month of September, then you already know the topic, because it is supervision, because that's all we talk about in September. It's the only thing, nothing else. Get out of here, other topics. It's supervision September. And we've been doing how many years have we been doing Supervision September now?
9.
I think all the years.
All the years?
9. All the years.
All the years. Many years we have done it. And we've read lots of articles about, thought pieces on supervision and what does business tell us about supervision? And we took a moment and we looked at the lay of the land and we said to ourselves, hey, there's a lot of articles about, we think this is a great idea for supervision and we're great supervisors. So here's an article. And we realized that's not quite the same thing as, hey, we used these interventions and did relevant research using them, and here is the data on it, or here are the data on it, and this is the best supervision according to science. And, we wondered, does anybody actually know the answer to that question? And we were very, very fortunate. And not one, but 2 people have, I don't know if they want me to say that they have the answer, but they are certainly looking at the answer in a much more concrete and data-driven and scientific way than I think a lot of our supervision content in the past has been. So we're very, very fortunate to have 2 special guests on today. We have Drs. Natalie Andzik and Dr. Michael Kranak. Thank you both for coming on today to talk about what we actually know for sure about supervision.
No, thank you all so much for the opportunity. This is definitely a topic that Natalie and I are, as you alluded to, incredibly passionate about. So we're very excited for the opportunity to be here today.
Oh, and Rob, you said we have answers? You didn't tell us that you wanted us to come on this podcast with answers. Man, this will be tricky. I don't know if we have answers, but yeah, thanks for having us. And we'll do our best to kind of summarize what we've found in our own research and looking at other people's research about supervision.
Ooh. Man, what a bait and switch, Rob.
I know.
You're like, well, we'll have a
Surprise.
casual conversation.
You thought we were coming on to talk about pronouns and direct objects, but no, Natalie, it's supervision. I fooled you. So why don't we start off by talking a little bit about, both of you, sort of, how you came to be so passionate about the content or the research of, the writing about, the reading about supervision.
And maybe, too, how you came to write such kick-ass articles together as a team.
Oh, yes. The team up episode.
Kick A, because we're a child-friendly podcast. Who's a child-friendly? So children are listening to supervision.
So many children listen. You wouldn't even know.
Children are getting CEUs. I mean, we got to get those CEUs. Michael, tell them how we met.
Oh, man. So Natalie and I go way back. We're besties. We met at Ohio State in 2014, fall of 2014. She was working on her PhD and I was working on my master's. And ever since then, we just said, hey, we should always have a running project together. And so one area that we overlap in as far as our research interests go is supervision. And so we've kind of just always had at least 1 or 2 projects going in the background, be that lit reviews or collaborating with working with our students. And so that's how we came to work on these specific papers together.
Yeah, and Michael, does a lot of supervision of aspiring BCBAs, and I do too. But I also, do a lot of work in clinics and schools where I'm just like supporting those paras, supporting the RBT, and supporting the admin. So I'm not supervising them, but when I'm in my supervision class that I'm teaching in my BCBA program here at Northern Illinois University, it's not just about when are you a supervisor and when do you have a contract? It's like, how are you talking to other human beings? Like, how are you talking to peers of kids and siblings of kids? Like, so that act is, just generally supervision. And so I really like that. I really like collaborating with people. I've always been, my passion is inclusion. I was a special ed teacher for a long time, and my kids were in gen ed classes. So I was, quote, supervising gen ed teachers, supervising those gen ed peers. And so, it just kind of became a passion of mine. Like, how do you be nice to other people to make sure they're nice to your clients? Yeah.
I appreciate you saying that, directly, Natalie, because I think reading all y'all's papers, I had the sense that you both saw supervision as more than just, like you said, well, you have to have a contract, and then here are the steps to do to make sure your supervisee can sit for the BACB exam, that it really was this all-encompassing set of skills in which, certain ones are going to be more or less formalized, but you have to be wearing your supervisor hat pretty much anytime you are working with somebody who is listening to you, or, unless it may be like a client stakeholder, that might be the only time. But even then, most of the skills that I would say, I've read about or I've used in my own supervision, you're pulling from those skills all the time. It's like a really great skill set to have. Though, while we mostly talk about supervision in September for, that very specific content of supervising folks who are going to get ready to become BCBAs, we really do love that you also have that same sense of it should be more all-encompassing.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for that.
You have to supervise more than just in September, too. Year round.
Yeah.
Oh, I just thought you got really good at it in September and then took the rest of the year off.
No.
Oh.
That's why it's an important topic.
My contracts only go from beginning of to end of September. I'm really great that month.
Yeah.
And then if you fall asleep, then we can play the Green Day song.
Yeah.
So, Diana, what are the articles we'll be discussing today?
Oh, why, sure. Let me tell you what some of those are. In no particular...
Just tell me all of them. You don't have to tell me some of them.
Oh, you want all?
I want all the articles.
I'm actually about to tell you about the wrong episode, so that was a good catch on my part. Yes, so our guests have provided us with 3 articles to take a look at today, and they include, in no particular order, a scoping review of research on and strategies for mitigating burnout among board-certified behavior analysts by Kranak, Andzik, Jones, and Grunwald. That was published in Behavior Analysis Research and Practice 2024. Also, the softer side of supervision. Recommendations when teaching and evaluating behavior analytic professionalism by Andzik and Kranak, and also published in Behavior Analysis Research and Practice, but this time in 2021. And finally, a systematic review of supervision research related to board-certified behavior analysts by Kranak, Andzik, Jones, and Hall. That was in Behavior Analysis and Practice 2023.
All right. So 3 very good articles, very broad in terms of topics. Talking about burnout, we're talking about, supervision soft skills, and we're just talking about supervision techniques in general. So a lot of interesting areas to be discussing in the time we have today. But I thought I'd lead us off with a question that I just thought of based on something you said, Michael. You mentioned the two of you just always wanted to do work together. And I was like, kind of like a Lennon and McCartney of research. Do you have a rule for whose name goes first on the articles like Lennon and McCartney did? Or is it flip a coin? What do you do?
So generally, the rule that we operate is whoever comes up with the last idea, the next person comes up with the next idea, and then we flip-flop whoever's name. So, for example, Natalie came up with the soft skills paper. So she took first author and she led that project. Then the next one was the supervision lit review. That was one of my brain children. And then so we said, okay, I'll go first, you go second, and then. Same thing held true with the burnout review. I was like, wait a minute, another idea. Let's strike while the iron's hot. And so that's just kind of how we have operated with the projects that we have together.
Okay, very
cool.
So it sounds like you're thinking way ahead in terms of like all your credits, so that for your 50th album, you're still good to go. I love it.
Yeah, exactly.
Actually, he's not being truthful. It's actually like a cage match. We just fight, and whoever comes out on top is the first author. That's usually how it works.
Okay, I mean, that's fair, too.
These are the things you only learn about
that's
on this podcast.
That's how Jackie and I do it.
Yes, it's great.
You heard it here first.
Yeah, inside look behind the peer review curtain.
So I kind of want to start off with some general supervision talk, and then I want to sort of, we can drill a little bit more into some of the articles. When it comes to being a quality doing quality supervisory work. What would you both say are some of like the key components of being a good supervisor? Like, what do you need to be able to talk the talk and walk the walk of supervision?
I looked at this too, and then I know that maybe jumping the gun a little bit, you might ask, well, what does it mean to be a quality supervisee or a quality trainee? And my answer to that question is the same for both. And obviously you can apply these differently, but the first is be receptive to feedback, especially as a supervisor, because there is an inherent power imbalance there where like you're the all-knowing BCBA, you're the all-knowing supervisor, you're going to sign off on, their requirements and whatnot. But making sure that if your mentorship style or your supervision style isn't aligning with the goals of your supervisee or your trainee, be able to adjust that and just take that feedback and say, okay, I could do better here. Thank you so much for telling me that. Flip that around. Be sure to instill in your trainees and supervisees that when you're giving them feedback, you only give feedback to people you care about. If I don't care about you, I'm going to not give you any feedback and let you keep being a train wreck. Like, why would I give somebody feedback if I don't want to see them improve? And that's definitely something that I've stressed with my students and trainees from the onset of our supervision experiences.
Yeah, and it's always it's all the same stuff, like just good soft skills, right? Professionalism, caring about each other. Like, it is a relationship. It is not just, we talk about dual relationships and things do get murky. We've had a lot of questions in my classes about that. Like, hey, we're friends, but now we're, in the supervisory relationship. But it is a relationship. You're talking every week, hours, and going through some hard stuff or ups and downs, drama, parents and things. So open communication and just keeping those professionalism kind of, that line pretty thick. We might be going out to have coffee to have our supervision meeting, but that's kind of where it ends. Just keeping it really professional. I've seen a lot of bad things slip when those multiple relationships start to develop, and it's really hard. I'm teaching ethics this summer, and it's like, oh my gosh, how do you avoid this? It's, and as you all know, ethics is so gray. It's so hard because you are spending so much time with these people. But just recognizing that the two of you do need to keep those hats on. Like, you've got your clinical supervisor hat, you've got, you're an RBT at the time you're getting your hours. But I am the supervisor in this relationship, and I am the supervisee in this relationship. That does keep things pretty professional. It does help keep those lines from blurring.
Okay. And I also say recognizing those hats too. So, for example, we all have things going on outside of that supervisory relationship that might impact what we're doing within the supervisory relationship. We're not just supervisor and supervisee. For example, in 2025, in 2023, one of my cats suddenly passed away. Later that week, I had, 3 supervision meetings. I had to teach class. I had a couple meetings with other stakeholders. I sent out an email to everybody like, hey, I just want you to know that this is going on. If I seem unattentive, or if I'm, maybe not as patient as I normally am, or if I'm a little sharper in how I'm talking, it is not a reflection on you. It's not a reflection on anything that we're talking about. It has everything to do with me. And I cannot tell you how many, hopefully, everybody's like, oh, so sorry to hear. Everybody's like, thank you for, giving us this heads up. We're not going to hold anything against you, of course. And so I think being transparent that if you have some other things going on, like, that's going to make the relationship go much more smoothly, at least in my opinion and perspective.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's part of recognizing the humanity of everyone in the relationship too, right? And that's what you were saying earlier, Michael, as well, is like, I'm going to give you feedback here because I care about you and I care about your professional development and growth. And I recognize you as not just my trainee, but like someday my colleague and someone who's going to contribute to this field. And we're all coming to this with slightly different backgrounds, slightly different histories, and our own like kind of quirks and personality. But moving through that together is the process, right? Like, that's the relationship is how you're going to move through that together. So
exactly.
Yeah.
So thank you both for sharing kind of your number ones, number twos, your top skills to be looking for. A lot of the work that at least we read for this episode really covered more kind of broad research reviews. And I certainly know we always love hearing kind of the story of, how did you decide, let's do this research review? How did you develop the protocol for it? Because there's so many different articles, that you could be looking at, ways that you could do the review, different questions to look at the same research. Supervision feels like one of those topics that, and I think you even wrote, like, most of the research was written from, you look back, it's not even that long that we've been actually writing about supervision in this time. So I always wanted to question, like, were you like, what should we write about? Supervision. There's just not that much research. We'll get that done in an afternoon.
Right.
So where did the idea come from? How did you develop the kind of idea to do your kind of review of what's out there for supervision?
I think we had just been seeing so many presentations on the topic, and then also you can't open LinkedIn or Instagram or any social media website without seeing posts or comments or discussions on supervision. And I'm sure a lot of that has to do with the fact that you have to get X number of supervision CEUs every certification cycle. So it makes a lot of sense. But I think one thing that really stuck out to Natalie and me was there's a lot of talk about and around supervision. And most of the presentations that we were seeing at the time were, to be a little candid, more motivational in their topic. And they were long on motivation, short on data. And I'm not saying I want someone to stand up in front of a crowd and tell me, your exact IOA coefficients, but I am expecting there to be some empirical data, because that is what our field is. We are a science. And so we're like, I wonder if what we're seeing sort of in this presentation, zeitgeist is mapping on with what's happening in peer-reviewed publications. And lo and behold, that's exactly what we found, is that 75% at the time of our review, 75% of all supervision publications were either discussion-based papers or survey-based papers, including 50% of those were discussion papers. And so I think that was essentially what spurred us to do that. Natalie and I recalling correctly.
Yeah, I mean, it's also just like these survey papers that, I'm sorry, your question is about how we kind of got going, and now we're kind of in the thick of the weeds here. But, when we started looking at these papers, and one of the reasons also what motivated us to start looking at this was selfish. We have supervisees. We want our students to get involved in research, and the best way to really get them to understand what's out there and be part of that was to do so all of the extra authors you'll ever see on all of our papers are our students. There are supervisees, there are trainees, there are master's students, there are grad students. So it's nice to just get them involved. And Michael and I both feel like if we want to get them to be researchers and better and do better and be part of the change and have more data-based, products, it's to involve them. So that's kind of how we got going. We're supervising these people like, hey, how do we, for example, how do we teach soft skills? How do we, what is the research out there about this topic? What are we doing about burnout? We have a student who's talking about it. We're like, let's research that. So that's kind of how we get going on all of our papers, is just what's currently pressing us in the moment.
Yeah. So you had a whole bunch of supervision articles. You were coding them into different sections. I think, Michael, you mentioned a couple of certainly the idea, okay, which ones are just discussion topics? I think survey was another one. And then I can't remember if there was a fourth, but I know intervention. How many supervision studies looked at an intervention related to improving supervision in some form and got actual results in using, an experimental design?
Exactly.
I'd love, kind of what were the general findings? How many in the different, Michael, you mentioned a couple, but what were some of the other, you don't have to give exact percentages, but generally what were you finding to be, true in terms of what's out there for supervision?
So you're going to make me recall immediately off the top of my head. Thank goodness I've got the article pulled up on my other monitor over here in the command center.
You don't need your percent. I have them somewhere in the notes below. You don't need the exact percentages. I think it was very, reading it, it was very geez, it was very shocking kind of.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like we said a few minutes ago. It's most of what we know is based off of folks' experiences. And so, like we mentioned, 50% of all articles published at the time were discussion papers. And what I think too is, everybody likes to talk about these really nice survey papers that have come out there. One thing that I encourage my students and your listeners right now, when we look at the results from any survey, the average number of respondents in all of the supervision surveys is 237. That represents 0.03% of about 77,000 certified BCBAs. And so I think that sometimes those survey results are maybe presented as the ground truth or being representative of all BCBAs. And I think it's important to remember that No, these results are coming from less than 1% of all certified behavior analysts. And so I think that is a big, and also to be clear, that doesn't mean there's no value in those data. I want to be very clear about that. But it is a reminder of, hey, the generality is probably lacking. It's not as representative as we would hope a larger sample size or a larger powered survey study would be.
Yeah. And as a self-selecting group that chose to complete a survey.
Exactly. One thing that I wish was possible is, when we distribute sort of these surveys, and Natalie and I, we published a survey on, ironically, CEU accrual, and, it is so hard to get folks to respond to surveys. So I am very sympathetic to that. At the same time, I can look at this both as a consumer of the research and also as a responder. And so I say, okay, like I understand this, and this is not as representative as we would hope or as it's being presented.
Yeah.
So when it comes to sort of looking at so much of our research and so much of what we're saying, hey, let's keep that echo chamber of we read research, so much of it being either survey of a very small group with, potentially no generality, discussion pieces, which again, it's great to hear people who've been doing the job for a long time share their thoughts and say, here's a tool I use, maybe you'll like it too, is not the same as here's a tool that's used by thousands of people and here's why it's better to use this tool than no tool or this tool and a different tool. And then the interventions. And I think it was like, you didn't have too many interventions that you found. I got to say, 2 out of 3 of the ones you discussed in the paper, so I think those are the 3 that were published ones, were written by 2 of the people who are on this podcast. And they weren't you guys. And it wasn't me. So there's only 2 other people. Why?
Two.
Who were they?
Who
I don't know.
Where does that leave us?
The listeners have to do the math.
But you did say there was a lot in the works in terms of theses and dissertations that are hopefully in the publication pipeline.
But why do you think that is? We're such a field of, real, tight science and experimental design. Why is supervision a topic in which we're just kind of, we're not doing intervention studies as much? Why do you think that might be?
Yeah, I think that it's just, supervision is so personal. Where are you getting your supervision? Are you in a clinic? Are you in a home? Are you in a hospital? Are you in a public school? Are you in a private school? And who are you? What's your background? What is your makeup? What is your experience? Who's your supervisor? Are you close? Are they mean? Are they kind of rude to you? Are you in group supervision? Are you paying for supervision? You're only doing a little bit. You're doing it over 5 years. Are you funded and it's intense and it's all the time and every week? It's so different for everyone. Like we would never have like a straight prescription of something for a kid with very significant autism or Down syndrome, right? Like everything has to be adjusted. Even the way we visually analyze our data in single case, everyone was like, it has to be this way. And it's like, but it can't be that way if everyone is so different. So I think it's really hard to have like a prescription, something that we can like assess because everyone's so unique. It has to be single case. And yes, what we know about evidence-based practices and what works clearinghouse, and yes, enough replication of a single case design in enough places. Now it can be an evidence-based practice, but everyone's got to get on board with that. But like, who wants to do a single case with like 5 supervisors and well, that's not going to work with my group because they were in a clinic and I'm in a home. And so I think that's probably a big reason why we're not seeing more empirical, like data-based studies, emerge. I just did a review for a paper that's, in the works. It's not, private, super top secret. I can't tell you anything about it, but it was really cool to read that they piloted a really cool thing. I had a lot of feedback like, hey, more data here. But I think people are out there trying to do that. But those just thinking about that article, they had a pretty big sample size because they had a huge company. So they had a ton of people. So just like the average researcher, a faculty member, right? Not everyone's taking on a load of supervisors, right? So your average supervisor is in a clinic, right? They're getting paid X amount of dollars per year, and a percentage of their time is supervision, and they're not researching, they're not publishing. So I think there's a lot of reasons why there's not a lot of data about like, this is what we should try and do. This worked for us. You should try, with your group, let's replicate just because of the very individual nature of, everyone's story.
Mm-hmm. I think too, when we think about what it means, we opened the podcast with what it means to be a supervisor. There is a set of things as indicated by the BACB that we have to hit in the goals of that relationship, probably, obviously taking data is a great thing to do to be a quality supervisor. At the same time, working as Natalie was just describing and conducting a single case study within the context of supervision, probably not the 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe even top 5 things that we're trying to target as supervisors for our supervisees. And so I think that's totally fine, and to recognize that as well. I think another reason, and Natalie, you were just talking about that you're reviewing a paper, so I don't want to de-identify anybody. So I'm an associate editor for behavior analysis and practice, and I handle a lot of supervision related submissions. Most of the submissions that I see, and they're still coming out, they're trickling out, are still discussion-based papers. And I think because there is a precedent that, hey, these papers seem to be valuable, there is precedent for publishing them. But I think that most folks involved in that process now are starting to say, okay, let's maybe pump the brakes on these recommendation discussion-based papers. Maybe that well has run dry a little bit. Maybe it is time to start taking these recommendations and actually evaluate them in a sort of empirical fashion. Mm-hmm. I saw a great example of this. It just came out in the Journal of Applied Behavior Analysis. Shout out Abby Blackman. I think it's just last week, where they evaluated, LeBlanc and Nosek put out a paper in BAP about how to plan and lead effective meetings. And Blackman et al. Recently evaluated how do you plan and lead effective meetings? Because I'm sure all of us need another meeting on our calendar, like we need a hole in our heads. Mm-hmm. So I'm sure that we have probably spent a fair amount of times in meetings that could have been emails. And so I think that is a really nice example of, here are some recommendations. Now let's empirically evaluate them directly within a behavior analytic context. So I would love to see more of that happen. And I think it will.
Mm-hmm. Michael, on that topic, it's next month, listeners. We do our grab bags where we each pick articles we just want to talk about that aren't theme based. Mm-hmm. I actually just put that one into our folder to review on the show. Nice. Because I was reviewing my notes for today, and I said, "Oh my God, this is exactly what we're going to be talking about." So I want to double toot of the horn to that group for practicing what I think we're going to be preaching a bit today.
Yeah.
Very cool. But I think that this trend that you're discussing here is one that we've seen in other areas in our field as well, right? So this is the same pattern that we've seen when we think about cultural responsiveness and the skills related to that, and the same that we've seen with compassionate care and the skills related to that. Yes. Oh, I know. Very good. I'm getting a lot of nonverbal feedback from
listeners up there. Yes. This is more passion topics here. Yes. But anyway, sorry, continue.
No, so I think this is on track, right? And this is a healthy direction that we see in our science, that first we think about what we want to study and we write about that, and then we drill down into the weeds of how are we actually going to study it and demonstrate what are the most effective ways to do that. So we're seeing that growth as well in the area of supervisory practices.
100%. And it's not a bad thing to highlight this. It's a good thing. It shows that there's opportunities for growth and opportunities to improve in what we're doing. And, if there's any master students out there listening to this and you need a thesis idea, go pick any of the tools that were published or that we listed that have been published on supervision, and go empirically validate it. There's a slam dunk, publication, in my opinion. So go forth, evaluate, and publish. Go off, kings and queens. Come on.
And I do want to say you both did an excellent job in the paper laying out, these are the tools that are recommended to use. Here's what they do. Here's what they say they can help with. They're not empirically validated, though, which, totally. I'm always shocked that those articles don't come out and all of a sudden every grad student's like, thank God, I don't have to think for any longer. I can just grab this one. And I got the article that has all the references. I'm just going to go page through. I mean, it's like you did their homework for them.
Yeah, but you know what? Can I just give a plea to all the authors? Man, can we make them fillable PDFs or Word documents? I tell you, the amount of those wonderful takeaways that I've had to convert to Word and then convert back and then change and edit. We have got to do better about making those fillable PDFs or Word. Those takeaways are so helpful. I mean, I'm using one of those right now in my ethics class. They're super nice. Not supervision related, I apologize, but I'm using a takeaway from an ethics paper, and it's so lovely and so helpful. And as a faculty, I'm like, I'm not having to reinvent the wheel. I don't have to open up a blank Word document. There's a really wonderful place for all of these, but now let's go see if they help. Let's go see if they work. Let's get feedback from our supervisors. Let's let's publish it. Let's get that out there and see, are these actually working for us?
Mm-hmm.
But don't you get excited when you get to make a new spreadsheet?
Oh, yeah. Open up and freeze that first row and make it gray.
Yep. I'll spend a whole afternoon just on that, but that's a different podcast.
See, that feels like an AI use of like AI.
What? Don't take away my favorite thing, please.
Take this table and like make it so I can fill out a thing in Excel. Like, go do this.
Yeah.
I tried to do the calendar with AI, and it was like, do you want a list in Word? I'm like, no, you're not doing it right. So I don't see what the fuss is about. Doesn't do it.
Again, in different podcasts.
Yeah, different podcasts, but it is amazing how sometimes even the machines can't do what we're asking them to do. Like, please just put this into a nice little Excel template. And it's like, you want me to what? It's like, okay, fine. I'll do it myself.
I can summarize the tool and give you lying information about it if you want, but I can't quite put it in a fillable PDF. I don't know why. Hey, everybody, sorry to pause the show real quick, but we need to take a little break. We'll be back with more from Dr. Kranak and Dr. Andzik in just a moment. We'll be right back.
Hi, do you want to be a BCBA, also known as a board certified behavior analyst?
Sure, we all do.
Now you can come to Regis College in Weston, Massachusetts to get your graduate degree just minutes outside of Boston.
Choose from any one of these courses.
Masters of Science in Applied Behavior Analysis.
Masters of Science in Special Education, dual degree in Special Ed and ABA.
Or be eligible for your postmaster certificate.
You can complete your degree and be ready to sit for the exam in 2 years.
And our 2022 graduates had a 92% pass rate on the BACB exam.
Come enjoy approved fieldwork placements, ethics mini handbooks, PhD levels professors, small class sizes, and a service trip to Iceland if interested.
And don't forget, our program is accredited by the Association of Behavior Analysis International, or ABAI, as a Tier 1 master's degree program.
Don't delay. Supplies are limited. Learn more at regiscollege.edu.
Again, that's www.regiscollege.edu.
regiscollege.edu.
One more time, www.regiscollege.edu.
See you there.
Bye.
And we are back talking with Dr. Michael Kranak and Dr. Natalie Andzik all about what we know about supervision. But before we continue that topic, I want to remind all our listeners that ABA Inside Track is ACE and QABA approved. And by listening, you're able to earn one SUPERVISION CE. All you need to do is finish listening to the show, then go to our website, abainsidetrack.com, or click the link in your podcast player notes area to put in some key information about yourself, as well as our secret code words. These are special secret guest code words. The first of those code words is CATS, CATS. Whether you have cats around you as you're listening, whether you are enjoying the movie Cats or the soundtrack, CATS is the code word for you. CATS. All right,
Thankfully, it's not Jenny Anydots.
Oh, yikes. No, thank you. Let's get back to our conversation. Natalie, thank you. That's kind of one of the weaknesses of some of these tools is they're hard to replicate without some extra steps. Yeah. Sometimes it's easier to find them online too in the additional, sections of some of these articles. But do you still find like a value, like as you're reading all of these studies and you're getting all of these takeaway tools? I think the challenge I always see with the takeaway tools is they are very much, we as somebody who's done a lot of supervision made these to make our lives easier. So we like them, and maybe you'll like them too, which does give them that lived-in feel. But like we've been talking about, that doesn't necessarily make them relevant to my supervisory context. So when you're seeing all these tools, when you were summarizing these tools, I mean, were you feeling kind of optimistic about them? Were you sort of in that critical mindset of like, yeah, but these could be better. Here's how we need to make them better. Like, what are the other strengths and weaknesses of sort of, if I just said, you know what, I'm going to take all the tools and make a binder, and that's my supervision technique from here on out. Like, bad idea, good idea. What do you think?
It's kind of like teacher pay teacher. I teach in the teacher prep program. It's not a psych program where we have our BCB program. And it's like, you can go online and find all these things, and are they helpful? I don't know. I mean, at some point you do have to personalize your things. Like even our soft skills paper, that we had some charts and things that were, take away. They have to be personalized. And that's maybe, I think, but at the end of the day, I think it is a good starting point. All of them, we looked at all of them. We're like, oh, I wouldn't have done it that way. That's cool. Like, it's like, no one really wants to open up a blank Word document and make a data sheet for, and you name it, right? But having something that's already completed, at least it's inspiration and gets people thinking. Like, when we talk about having these critical conversations, or there's been a lot of really nice work from our colleagues about that, like the sticky stuff, like what happens when, like your supervisor's kind of a jerk, or how do you handle these complicated conversations? No one needs a chart for that. No one needs a PDF with drop-down menus. You just need to have some strategies and some maybe opening phrases, or even just like a chart of like, well, if you go to your supervisor and you don't remedy, like, then what? Do you go to the admin? Do you report them to the ethics board? Like, yeah. So sometimes it does feel a little bit pushed. Like I don't need a chart for that kind of strategy, but it's in other cases, it is really helpful to just like get the ball rolling, just to not have to start from scratch.
It's like one thing when I'm supervising, I'm always thinking about like, oh, I have to start something new. And then that goes to the bottom of my list, right? And I do all the other easier things. And then that comes back. And the next day I put it on my list again, right at the bottom. And so at least if something's there, it might, the response effort is lower. So supervisors may be more willing to, modify it and use it
100%.
And then be better supervisors.
And there's definitely value in the tools. I think that's something that Natalie and I want to be crystal clear about. For example, I forget if it's Turner et al. 2016 or Valentino et al. 2016. It came out in the special issue on supervision and BAT, but I think they talk about the sort of strengths and weaknesses of what you might cover in group supervision versus individual one-on-one supervision. And I think that's a great, takeaway tool. Okay, like maybe these are some things that are more amenable to a group format, or when I think about the number of new, recently certified BCBAs who now have to wait, a year before they're allowed to supervise independently, all of these recommendations and these tools are probably a great starting point for someone who doesn't have a ton of experience under their belts. Excuse me. And so I think that, that's definitely a valuable aspect right there. But to come back, this the same side of that, or the other side of that same coin is, and remember, we really haven't validated them in this context. We don't know if we use, takeaway tool X, does that improve supervisory skill Y? And like I mentioned earlier, that's not a bad thing. That's just a thing that we can talk about and make sure that, this is an opportunity to improve the very rich evidence base underlying supervision.
Yeah, and I like the shopping aspect of it. I'm more inclined to suggest to my students and my newer BCBAs all of these different tools from all of these different authors, then I would say go buy this workbook by this one group of author. It's their like opinion and their experience, and like their literal lived experience has created this workbook. When it's all together and it's bound and it's $19.99 on Amazon, I appreciate that, but that's just that one perspective. And, so I do like the idea of shopping around with these different authors. And some of these authors that created these tools were really new in the field. They were, taking their thesis and dissertations and publishing them. So like, these are like the fresh minds, right? Coming up with these cool ideas. So I do like that shopping aspect. Like I need this one little thing. I don't need a $49.99 workbook, but I do just need, I do like that aspect of these takeaways. It's very helpful.
Yeah. There's kind of this chicken and egg piece when it comes to some of these takeaways of it is so nice when you don't know how to do a skill to have somebody say, here, just use the thing I made. But then if you don't have the skill already to know, well, here's what I like about this. Here's what I don't like about this for my client. Here's how I'm going to change it to make it better for me and my clients. Right. But if you don't know that because you just bought it, because you don't know how to do supervision, how are you supposed to know that this isn't good for what you, and it just feels like this weird, like, well, amalgam of we've done this long enough. It kind of all smushes together of like, I like this because I know I don't want to make these types of spreadsheets. Like I don't want to make the spreadsheets Diana's making, but I know enough about what I need them for to know how I'm going to change them to fit in the context to benefit my supervisees versus her supervisees.
Right.
But you either know it or you don't. And that can put you. So I think there's still room for that empirical validation of like, which of these are the ones like you give them to my first supervisee, supervisor to just use as is or use with these tweaks. So still room for growth.
And some things that we do in supervision are common sense, right? Or some things that we think would help, a couple issues are probably common sense. So, and I think this is particularly important to keep in mind because, the behavior analytic marketplace is getting much larger. And so I feel like every day I'll open up Facebook and I see an ad for some new supervision XYZ, you name it. And I remember when Natalie and I were, I think, kicking around not to get too spicy, but we were kicking around the soft skills paper, and one resource that we looked at, one of their main recommendations was buy a planner. And we're like, oh, that seems pretty common sense. If you're struggling with time management, buy a planner, buy a calendar. Like, yes, would you believe that makes sense? And so I think being a little bit mindful and just careful of what we're choosing to consume.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that I think would be really awesome and helpful as I was listening is if all of these takeaways were in empirical articles, right, as appendices, because then people would be forced to go to the research that, like, maybe there's like a whole supervision journal, right? Or there's like one place where someone can subscribe to supervision and there's all the research and there are the appendices, right? Like when you buy a book and like there's like we're reading another book for 13 management strategies for supervision.
That's September. The name of the book. Jackie didn't just make a mistake and then
I did it again, but I do that every time. And at the end, they have this performance matrix, which I really love, right? And it's in the book. But wouldn't it be nice if we had a supervision journal that instead of going to Facebook Marketplace, everyone could go to the supervision journal and then every article had to have a takeaway that somebody could use as part of their supervision? Like, wouldn't that be amazing?
Right. Now, Jackie, thank you so much. Because Rob, you asked earlier, what was one of the things that inspired us for the supervision paper? That right? was something too, is we wanted to have, like, there's so much out there. It's the Wild West of supervision. Yeah. What is all out there? How can we provide sort of this one comprehensive paper that can serve as a resource, not just for supervisors and trainees, but those in training programs who have to teach a supervision class? Here is this one comprehensive resource that lists every supervision paper published between now and September 2023, or whenever we completed that. And so, 100%. Or if you had a podcast that was doing an entire month series on supervision, that's probably a really great resource for folks to have as well.
Yeah. Well, about 2 years ago, we were like, oh no, have we covered all of the supervision?
The answer is yes. Yeah, the answer may have been yes.
I got nervous. Yeah. I got nervous.
But things have picked back up. So there's
why we started putting the supervision books in, because we're like, we're out of article.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. We need some books.
There are some awesome books out there. I especially love the LeBlanc et al. 2020 book that just came out. That's a really good one.
So good.
Yes.
It's amazing. We use it in our course as well.
What was I going to say? I was going to say something, which was that just as in all of the other areas of our field, right? Like there's really clear parallels in how we should be approaching our working with our trainees and how we approach working with clients. So even if there is, maybe some type of standardized skill assessment that we do for trainees, that doesn't then mean that we need to, just as the same with the VB map or whatever it might be, it doesn't mean that that's then going to need to be prescriptive in how we approach supervision, right? And if you are new to that area or attempting to use maybe a book or something that doesn't go into that level of nuance, then you might just try to just like plow through like skill after skill after skill. That shouldn't be recommended for clients or trainees as well. So I think this is going back to everyone's point about the pick and choose and the go shopping around, right? To find what's really going to be a good fit for you and your trainee specifically.
Just so folks don't think that after you published this scoping review that you've just been too sad to talk about supervision because the state isn't where you want it to be. You also have published on, making tools. You've also published on skills to use for supervision. So I'd like to make sure we also focus on some of the work you've also done in terms of recommending actual supervisory action rather than just, the conversation we've had where we're like, there's a lot of nice stuff, but we'd like to see more. Certainly your work on burnout, mitigating burnout as a supervisor, what are the skills that you can teach your supervisee? And then also soft skills, which are, as research has told us, everyone agrees we probably need soft skills, though maybe not everyone agrees we should put that in our supervision package. So I kind of like to switch gears a little bit on that. Let's see, any kind of interesting anecdotes about how you came to pick those two as topics you wanted to cover more, either in review or in kind of sharing resources?
That's a great question. No, I'd like to say there's some this really inspiring story. There was like a dog with 3 legs that we saved from a storm, in a tornado, and it inspired us to write these. But I think it literally just comes it comes in our brain, and we're like, let's think about it. It's conversations with our students or issues, right? Like with the soft skills, it comes down to like, hey, I'm seeing a lot of issues like with my students. Like we're talking about punctuality. We're talking about in my current students, it's like AI, right? Like, that's a soft skill. Like, when do you use it? How do you adjust? Like, when do you tweak? Professional dress, like when we have issues with in our own practice is usually what informs us when we are like, hey, let's write a paper about that. Let's see what's already written about that. And let's see if we can't take any of the principles that we already know to be good behavior analytic principles, and can we apply it here? And so that's kind of our motivation for the soft skills paper, was just like, hey, like Michael and I have been doing a lot of BST, right? For me, I'm an AAC researcher. I work with kids who use AAC, and I work with paras and teachers who support those kids. And so I'm using BST all day, right? And so we're like, could we apply this to some of these soft skill, like weird gray area behaviors that are not really easily defined even in some cases. And that's kind of how that paper kind of came about. And I think that was actually really fun for us to write. It was kind of fun.
Ironically, we talk about how many recommendation and discussion style papers are out there. Natalie and I had a heck of the time getting that paper accepted, which was interesting. A lot of the reviewer feedback was, you didn't empirically validate this. And so I'm like, a little pot to kettle home cooking action going on here. But I digress because it's out there. So I can talk a little bit about the burnout. And one thing that I actually try to do in any paper that I write or publish is I try to sprinkle in personal Easter eggs for people that know me. So, for example, in a recent paper that just came out with my colleague Adam Briggs, there's an example in there about someone who's afraid of needles. I don't like needles or blood draws. I absolutely hate getting them done. So the burnout paper, or the burnout review, was actually inspired by a burnout discussion paper that I wrote, which was called Put Out the Fire Before It Spreads. And I forget the rest of the title, but what inspired that was my wife, who is also a BCBA, and she was having a pretty difficult time at work at one of her places of employment. And that was just honestly one of my love languages to show her some support, was to write and publish a paper for her and be like, hey, like we all need to address burnout before we get there. And so that was then ultimately what inspired the scoping review. I would also say
was she happy about it or not?
Oh yeah, 100%.
Okay,
yeah, she loves it. Yeah, she is my biggest supporter. Shout out Sarah, who is trying to get our son, whose name is Jack Michael. So if you're, yes.
I love it.
This is actually now my litmus test to know if you really get behavior analysis, is when I tell you that my wife is also a BCBA and our son's name is Jack Michael. If you don't have that reaction that y'all just had, we probably should not speak
you're not
ever
a good
again.
BCBA.
Oh, good. I'm glad we had the right response.
Yes, from your mouth to God's ears, as I like to say. I'm sorry.
That's
where
really
were we?
sweet. That was a sweet story.
We're talking about babies.
Yeah.
That's where we are.
Yes. Well, we were talking about similar to the supervision stuff, is there's a lot of talk about and around burnout. And one of the things that Natalie and I learned was burnout has a very specific definition. And so what I think people are tacting as, air quotes for the listeners, burnout, your EO for work is just lowered. You have a pretty strong AO right now for work. Your EO for break is probably really high. And so recognizing that our EOs do ebb and flow, that's totally allowed. And, I'm sure that I've used, I'm so burnt out. I feel so burnt out right now. And burnout is, it's a very individualized aspect and phenomenon as well. And so everybody's threshold for when they constitute or meet burnout is, of course, going to differ on a case-by-case basis. But I think to talk about burnout, well, let's actually look at what behaviors we engage in when we're feeling burnout. A lot of them are escape-maintained or avoidance-maintained behaviors. What's a common treatment for escape-maintained problem behavior? Antecedent intervention. So why don't we take an antecedent approach to preventing burnout? And so I think that's one of the big things that we like to sort of shake our fist at the clouds in the sky about. At least I do.
I did appreciate in the scoping review of kind of, what do we know about burnout? What does the research tell us about burnout? First the definitions, but also I think the acknowledgement that while there are actions that the individual can do, that some of the kind of context for burnout are coming at the organizational level. I wasn't really sure, because I always have that. I'd seen a lot of the discussions on burnout. It felt like we had a year of everyone's burnout, so everyone's talking about burnout at every single conference. And it did seem like a lot of them were, here's what you need to do. And sometimes, while a lot of those recommendations I think are very useful, some of the ones I think were in the article, things like, putting yourself first or putting your interests first, working in a team you like, sound very actionable. If you're in a organization that doesn't value any of those things, or maybe isn't valuing you, your ability to control or to mitigate burnout is going to be kind of limited. Do you find supervision being kind of a weird middle ground to help with that? Or is it more just something that you need to teach your supervisees these techniques so they know when to kind of cut bait with the organization of like, this isn't a just you problem, this is a everybody problem?
Yeah, that's a really, really interesting question. And I'm teaching ethics this summer, and that we're right on the line there. Like, what is our ethical responsibility as a supervisor to see some, younger BCBAs, the people that you're overseeing. Again, I say supervision right now. Right now, my definition of supervision is you're like overseeing other BCBAs, right? Like, that's what I'm saying. You're supervising all these other BCBAs, and you're seeing burnout. Like, maybe you can't change the culture of the building, the caseloads, the things like that, but at some point, are you kind of ethically responsible for taking care of these people, in a way? Maybe not in our B2B ethics code, but like, hey, maybe this isn't the right place for you. This is, let me help you. Let me give you a letter of rec for somewhere else. I see that this is a really awful clinic for you. Can I transfer you? In my ethics class right now, I just feel like that's just, it is such a big issue. Where all of these people are so close to burnout. They're already experiencing symptoms of burnout. And they have all these supervisors and admin overseeing and not stepping in, not giving those, helping with those anesthesia manipulations, not happening. I work with a clinic down the way from me. I do research there, and they're constantly using like reinforcement systems and, Starbucks gift cards and early release Fridays for all sorts of different things like attendance or timeliness or data keeping or tracking. And their turnover rate's pretty low. They're always they're constantly trying to find ways to keep burnout low. And but also, do you have insurance that supports mental health support? Do your supervisees know that that's available? The intersection of supervision and burnout is so thick, and it's just in my experience, I teach. I've got, a group of 40 students every semester, two groups, so 80 students every semester. I feel like I have a pretty decent handle on what they're all hearing and feeling. And I do think that bridge is constantly crumbling in the field right now.
Mm-hmm. I think, it's important. So I keep my supervisory, just because I'm also a faculty member with Natalie, I try to keep my own supervisory caseload pretty low. So right now I've got 2 graduate students, shout out Meredith and Megan. And within the context of supervision, it's important to always be modeling and practicing those skills for burnout prevention. I don't think preventing or mitigating burnout should be like a set alone topic or a thing. So for example, in our coursework, maybe 1 week we're talking about schedules of reinforcement, and then 2 weeks later, we're talking about motivating operations. Throughout the supervisory process, we should be modeling these skills that help us, prevent our own burnout, or to help us have and I hate the term work-life balance because that implies that things are equal. So I use the term work-life equilibrium because we should recognize that there are going to be times that work demands more response allocation. At the same time, there are going to be opportunities for life to have more response allocation. So we should be practicing these skills that help us demonstrate and have good work-life equilibrium. For example, I try not to text or email my supervisees after working hours. Even though I might be working, that doesn't mean that they are working or should be expected to reply. Sort of the only time we'll text each other, or we have to keep in touch with a group chat rather than, a Microsoft Teams or a Slack link. We don't need any more of those in our lives. But, we'll text each other on the weekends if we saw something, dumb or funny. Like, that helps, I think, build that good collaborative, collegial nature. And so those are examples of that. Or making sure that one of the recommendations is do something for yourself before you work for anybody else. That's a recommendation that we got from Cal Newport's book, Deep Work. And so not being afraid to look at other sources where, okay, this is somewhat behavior analytic. Let's pull this in and let's maybe borrow from this or make it more behavior analytic. So I think that's a somewhat of a long-winded way of saying, yes, work on this with your supervisor using your trainees and work on it consistently. Good quality supervision is a process. It's not an outcome. It's something that we should always be working on.
Mm-hmm. I think it's similar to soft skills. I think a lot of the skills related to mitigating burnout, steps we can take, they do feel like while we've sort of opined on like, I wish there were more, research-based intervention studies with these skills. The idea of using BST, which does have, experimental validation behind it to practice these skills, to work on these skills, kind of feels like you got a little cheat code in terms of, even though, yes, there isn't exactly we'd use BST for these soft skills, and then we evaluated the package of BST. We know BST will work. Technically, it should work for teaching anything. Soft skills, the same as anything else. You didn't quite mention it in the paper, but do you think some of those burnout mitigation skills, like putting yourself first, the work, like I love that equilibrium idea. Do you think that also could be useful, or does that feel like overkill? Like we're making too analytic something that's a little bit more about the modeling and, reflecting?
Yeah.
Yes. And sorry, go ahead, Natalie.
And the OBM research, right? Like there's a ton of studies about workplace, safety, right? Keeping people from hurting themselves, right? There's a ton of published papers, like a lot of work on how to get people, like there's an article I use in my class about just someone who's late and, helping them find closer parking or setting their alarm at a different rate, like there's a lot of empirical studies published on keeping the workplace good, happy, where you want to be, so there's a lot of that out there, but are these organizations using any of those skills? Probably not. So like, I feel like that's like maybe where it needs to start. Like if you're interviewing for a job or you're working in a place and this, all of this research exists, right? Like how to keep your employees happy. It's not like, shocker. It's not employee of the month. That's what it's not.
We know that.
Wait, what?
Yeah, right.
Shout out Aubrey Daniel.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for all of the beautiful researchers who have basically said that's so silly and cute. But then it comes down to you. It's the yes, but right now it's on you. You do have to take some ownership of this. Like this is going to be, and it is personal, right? But like Michael said, you can't just teach this at the end. You can't just have this be a little end note, right? Just like in our teaching, we don't teach generalization as like, I don't know, week 14 of a behavior change class, right? Generalization has to be from the onset of your treatment. Our kids, as we know, literally know that they won't generalize without like programmed support. So just even from the first day of your supervisory relationship, you should be talking about like, are you happy where you're working? Like, where do you see yourself in 1 year, 1 month, 3 months, checking in with them and giving them those tips and strategies, so again, I think we have this murky gray area here where it's very, very personal and it has to be built, but it should be built into the supervisory relationship. It should be built into our 8-hour supervision training. It should be a big part of the conversation. How do we, as supervisors, make sure we are taking care of the upcoming field, the budding field, even us as faculty? We talk about it pretty regularly. And I have said to many students, I think you should quit your job. It sounds horrible. You can get a job anywhere, friend. Like you should quit your job. And that's okay to say, because that's not burnout. That's like, hey, you deserve respect. That's not leaving the field. So I think giving permission for that is kind of important. Michael, go ahead. You had something really smart to say, I'm sure.
I'm not sure if it was really smart. You give me far too much credit than I deserve. But I was going to say, with the yes and, yes, could we use BST? And that might be overkill to be like, okay, don't answer the email like this. That's ignoring the email. Like we don't need, something like that. And so I think using modeling and feedback are probably good things. So like I mentioned, I live on my email, even though I say I'm not going to. But, with my son, it's like maybe I need to answer emails at 8:00 at night after he went down. And that's when I'm going to be able to answer my email. So I use a lot of schedule send. So, 8 a.m. in the morning, you're going to get these emails instead of 9 p.m. But as I mentioned at the beginning, one of the critical key components of good quality supervision is being able to give and receive feedback. Don't be afraid to give your supervisees and trainees feedback if it's ultimately going to improve their mental health and well-being. So like, hey, I see you're having a hard time with this. Here's how I think you might be able to sort of handle this a little bit better. This is going to give you a little bit more balance. I know we have, some looming deadlines, but it's going to be okay. We're going to get through this. First things first, take it one at a time and then move forward with that.
Yeah.
So even though you might not need it all the time, I would love to hear a little more detailed example of, say, a time you would use BST in teaching, whether it's a burnout skill, burnout mitigation skill, I should say, or a soft skill. You don't have to do appropriate dress, even though that was the example you gave. And when I read that, I was like, the idea of BST appropriate dress, I feel like sounds like a cancelable skill to teach these days. But I would kind of.
It was described really well.
No. The article didn't make it sound. I'm just thinking about, like, if I were like, here's how I think you should be. I just feel like that's not gonna fly. And I sort of was thinking, what would that look like?
Yeah.
So would you mind kind of sharing?
Yeah, I think appropriate dress is totally okay. There's places you gotta, we got kids that are doing some super fun things, right? We got things flying. We got things being smeared. We got body parts. There are literal workplace, you got to be safe. You got to be careful. Like, you can't have stuff hanging all over the place. So, just taking that, right? The rationale, like, hey, this is literally what you're supposed to do here. Like, this is the job. Like, this is what your job place requires of you. That rationale is obviously pretty straightforward. But now in other places, like, what is professional dress, right? When you are, let's just say, a consulting BCBA in a school district, and you're just going in, you're observing kids, you're running some FAs, you're doing some PDs. Yeah, like, I don't know. In this day and age, like, you can't really tell me what to wear. And so I'm not dipping into that with those types of folks, because that's your self-expression, that's your culture, that's your background. Like, you wear whatever you want to wear. And now, if it's not well received, we can talk about it. If somebody makes a comment to you, like a person 20 years your senior in a different cultural background as you, let's talk about it. Let's not get mad. Let's not quit. Let's not, fight. But if we're just thinking about BST and something like that, a rationale, pretty straightforward. Hey, we need to wear this stuff because it's safe, because this is what, is required. The steps, we'll go through the employee handbook. We'll model, look what I'm wearing, look what she's wearing, look what that woman's wearing, look what he's wearing, look what they're wearing, and then some role play. Obviously, we're not going into their closet, with that role play piece.
Right. No fashion show.
No fashion show.
I want a supervision montage. All the outfits we're changing into quickly.
I would love a get ready with me, like, series with my supervisee in their closet, like, on Zoom.
Actually,
but,
that would be cool.
It is also possible to be like, hey, Google, like, let's show me some pictures of people going to work. Like, and we can just talk about, like, hey, that's good, that's bad, and here's why, and then just general feedback, right? Like, hey, I really like your outfit today. It looks really safe. Like, it looks like it's comfortable for you. How do you feel? It's weird. It is weird. Yep. But, I have undergrads coming into a school with kids with very, very, very significant challenging behavior, and they are truly at risk every time they come in, even though we protect them with furniture. And, I've got, I have to have these conversations, and my male colleague, shout out Dr. Perez, has to give that feedback to these, like, 20-year-old women, and it's very uncomfortable, but he's their supervisor. And it's like, hey, so I need to not be able to see your stomach in this setting because of these rules. It's uncomfortable, but it's uncomfortable for them. It feels really weird and icky, but it just has to be done. And then once it's done, it's usually like not a huge deal. So BST with these soft skills, the role play piece is kind of weird, right? Like Michael's saying, like, send me an email, let's practice, and now I'll send you an email and let's see how you respond. Like, that is the role play part of BST is, like, awkward. And, there have been a little bit of, like, some people have dipped into some component analysis of BST. Like, could we pull the role play? Is it still effective? It is. It's still effective without those pieces, right? Like, if you're teaching your mom who got a new iPhone, first of all, I'm so sorry. Good for you. If your 75-year-old mom got a new iPhone, teaching her how to, check her email. But you're not likely role playing with your mom, right? You're doing from, like, okay, this is where it is.
Here's
Mom.
your fake iPhone, Mom, right?
Here are the steps. Let's practice. And now here, so role play can be easily ditched when you're doing some weird stuff like that. And I think that's okay.
Yeah. I think I saved the role plays for it's going to be. It sounds like you're going to have an uncomfortable conversation with client, with stakeholder, with your boss. let's role play that, because if we don't, it's going to sound great now, and the second you walk out the door, it's going to be terrifying. So let's talk that through.
Yeah. I think that's a great example of a soft skill where, and also with soft skills too, one of the things Natalie and I try to stress is we can maybe attack that a little bit better, which makes it feel a little more substantial. So, we like to use the term behavior analytic professionalism. Mm-hmm. And then I'm not trying to open a can of worms of, well, who gets to define what professionalism is? I'm not trying to do that. We're simply talking about this set of behaviors that we can all agree is important to having, good therapeutic alliance and relationship with our clients and other stakeholders. But I actually use the example of, appropriate dress for a setting as a fun way to augment with BST. And so rather than doing, no need to role play, like, here's how I, tie a tie if I'm going to a conference. It's like, okay, you're going to be working in this setting with this certain population. Here is an array of clothing options. Can you select which one you think is the most appropriate that's going to ensure, your safety, client safety, comfortability, broadly defined. And so we can get creative with BST if that's something that we want to use in that specific setting. BST works for everything. I think we all know that. But if we consider BST our training hammer, sometimes when all you have is a hammer, everything starts to look like a nail. So yes, and we can use BST for certain things, but maybe we can have to get creative for those other areas of behavior analytic professionalism.
Mm-hmm. I had a whole training I put together once I work in school, so for teachers on classroom management. And everything I wrote, I was like, we're going to do BST. It's going to be the best training. Everyone is going to be so excited. And I don't know if it's just the teachers, it's certain teachers in Massachusetts, or if it's every teacher. The second we got to, let's role play this, the feedback I got was, I am absolutely not getting up and practicing this skill. Yeah. That is embarrassing, and you are now condescending. And they were very polite about it. Like, they gave me great feedback. But the sense I got was like, you were a jerk that you even thought this was going to be a part of the class. So I had to very quickly pivot. It was like a week class too. And I was like, I'm going to eat up so much time with all this practice. No one's going to practice. And I had to take that feedback and realize, as much as I think they're wrong and BST is the best every time and just do every step, I got to think about that. And maybe we won't. We'll just let them maybe practice with each other or talk to each other about what it might look like, and then share their thoughts with me. And then maybe I'll skip the feedback on that one because I don't know if they want to. So I hear you there, Michael. BST is awesome, but we can't just slavishly use it unless we want to get in some hot water, maybe.
And we know too, it's one of the best things that we can use to ensure competence of those demonstrable skills, especially if you've got, a 2 or 3 hour professional development with teachers, you want them to get the biggest learning bang for their training or teaching buck. So of course, BST, that might be where we're going to go. Like, if you can learn 2 or 3 behavior management skills, like, job done, like, praise be, you're doing the Lord's work, like, everything is fine and dandy. But if that group of consumers doesn't want to role play, well, you're probably not going to get buy-in in anything they're going to teach them. Same thing goes when we work in classrooms, inner teaching and, guided notes. Students don't really love inner teaching, and students kind of hate SAF meds, for example. So that's why I was kind of grimace when I hear teachers are like, I'm going to use SAF meds and I demand that you use SAF meds. I was like, God, students are telling us they hate SAF meds. So please, stop giving them SAF meds until the cows come home. There's no need for that.
Oh, I apologize for all of my students who are in the future listening to this, because I absolutely require SAF meds. But in your student reviews, you get 50% saying this is the worst thing I've ever done, and then 50% are like, oh my God, thank you so much for making me do those. Now I have this study, tool for the, so it is hit or miss, it really is. And, I Rob, I've worked with teachers, I'm a special ed teacher, and role play is like a forbidden word, in those settings, but gosh, man, it's sometimes you just have to see them do it. So we do, in some of my classes, I just push them. I am like, you gotta. And so, the way I get around that with some of my students in my university class is like, all right, cool. Well, go home, find somebody to role play with. I don't care. Someone, your kid, record it and send it to me. So maybe you don't want to do it in class. You want to do it in front of all these people, but I do need to see that you're proficient at delivering a preference assessment. I just need to see that you can take away the item and then rearrange and then represent, and, and they get that, and they're open to it. And in some cases, that is an option, is send your supervisee home, send your trainees home to do it on their own in their own time, make it fun. My students will dress up and they'll have funny costumes and really take the role of like the bitchy parent with their glass of wine and what are you telling me my kid is improving? It's cute how they do it, when they have a little bit more freedom on their own time. So that's always an option.
Oh, I like that. Yeah. So, and I think since that kind of brings us back to some of the topics we were discussing as we started, that context and how hard it can be sometimes to say it's always this way. And research says, because there's so many contexts that you don't know until you're doing a lot of the work. It seems like probably a good place for us to move into our dissemination station.
Yeah.
Oh boy. So, we have talked about a lot of really amazing topics. It's been a lot of fun, hearing from both of you about, what we know about supervision. This definitely works. This might work. We need more research. This is a great idea. If it works for you, go for it. But it's probably not going to be gold standard because there's no way to make it a gold standard because there's too many contextual variables. So looking ahead into just our field in terms of our work as supervisors, our research on supervision, what are you hoping to see in, up to 5 years, 1 year, 2 year, however long you want to go ahead? Like, what do you want to see going forward in publications? Where do you want to see supervision intervention kind of going specifically for our field?
If we're pulling into the dissemination station, we should recognize that, other forms of dissemination, this comment applies to them too. And especially for presentations, more data, less talk, more action. So I would love to see, more empirical evaluations of what's working in supervision practices. Can we get some, programmatic evaluations? So, for example, when I think about all of the universities out there that have, verified core sequences or they are accredited, like, can we have some, nice case demonstrations of here is what we do in our program. Here are some of our outcome data. Here's some empirical data behind how good our trainees and supervisees are doing. That's something that I would love to see. And then when I think about, again, similarly with the presentations, most supervision presentations that I see at conferences nowadays are very motivational and very inspirational, but they are lacking in data. Data should not and are not boring. It doesn't. If I'm saying I need to see more data, I'm not saying I want to see a boring presentation. We're saying that there's room for both of those topics to be, or both of those aspects to be related to and informed by this topic of supervision. So less talk, more action. Less talk, more data.
Yeah. And if I had a topic that I'd like to see delved into more, it's just generally more from the supervisee's perspective, right? So again, I'm reviewing articles for potential publication, and I'm reading about, well, the supervisees, they gave us this feedback, so we made this change, and it was great. I'm like, oh my God, look at you guys, like, taking the supervisee's perspective. I'm not saying a survey. Please, let's not survey our supervisees more and more and more, but just when we have people that are doing these research articles and doing these empirical validations, like a quick social validity thing at the end, like a 5-point Likert scale across 10 questions is not going to cut it. I want to know, did they like it? Did they not? Why? Can we tweak and adjust? And some of those just the discussion portions of these papers, that's what's going to fuel our field. Like, hey, this was good. We had good data, and here it is. But this was the feedback from our supervisees and how we can move forward. And I will also just like hang my advice on what Michael just said. All of us in the university, we're all getting accredited. We're all going through it right now. We all have changes that we're making over the next 8 years to be to keep our accreditation. We need to be working together. I tried to do a study where we looked at BCBA programs across the United States and how we're preparing. Oh man. That study fell apart real quick. We had like 10% of groups even responding to us, and then even less that were willing to share some syllabi with us. So it'd be great. Like, we're all doing the good stuff. We're all doing the good work. It'd be cool if we could all kind of come together as faculty and from these universities and core sequence spaces and just like, let's work together. We have some cool stuff that we're doing. Let's see like what's working.
Yeah. Supervision is what's going to move the field forward. And so I think making sure that we continue to push this importance on it. I think everybody out there wants to be the best supervisor that they can be. So just everyone keep up the good work and just recognize that we have a long, long way to keep going.
And that it's supervision for everyone, not just supervision for the BACB candidates.
Right.
Or
Exactly.
the RBT candidates, because that really grinds my gears.
Yeah.
Right? Because there are people doing work in our field that may never be an RBT or may never become a BCBA. And if you're not supervising them, you're doing a big discredit to our field. And that really,
Jackie,
gets
are you
me.
opening up a can of worms? Would you like to? We can talk about that. We could talk about that for another couple hours.
Part 2, right? I know that's part 2. But you had mentioned it earlier. It's like supervising everyone.
Yes,
and I just
everyone.
in my dissemination station, when you're a supervisor and you're supervising people, you need to include every single person that you see that's working with the client, not just the ones that you're writing down in their fieldwork tracker Excel spreadsheet.
Agree. Thanks, Jackie.
Well,
I'll add my.
Add your 2 cents.
My 2 cents here is that I think that we as supervisors, especially those of us who have been in the field a long time at this point, we have to continue to grow and evolve as well, and thinking about what supervision looks like for our current trainees, in that the world keeps changing. They are different than we were, right? And some of the aspects of the way in which we came up through the field and took the BCBA exam, even though we want to be like, well, this is how it was when I had to do it, doesn't mean that that was the best situation, right? Like, we were also super duper stressed out and maybe didn't get as much clear, direction as we wanted to. That doesn't mean that we now then need to turn around and make things hard for our trainees, right? So as much as we can continue to develop these types of tools and think about how we can really best accommodate for our students and their differences, and think about how we want to help them become the best BCBAs that they can be, that's the direction we should be going. So I think that if you were an old timer like myself, that might be a good reminder.
You mean just because we had to wait upwards of 2 to 3 months for our BCBA exam results, others don't have to wait for that nowadays?
That's right.
Those are the good old days. Yeah.
Those were the good old days. I just want everyone to know that when I took my BCBA, I had to drive like an hour and a half to a city to take it. And then I was so stressed out because, again, I wouldn't know for 3 months, that I crossed the threshold and passed out into a puddle. And some man had to buy me some orange juice from sitting in a puddle of Boston, right? Because I didn't live there. So I'm sitting in a puddle all wet right outside of the Pearson headquarters where I took my BACB exam on like a fake computer, like a weird, like, it was like, what? It was like fill in the blank at that point.
Scantron computer, yeah.
And because I'm old. And I just sat in the puddle and I was like, well, I hope this doesn't mean I passed, that I didn't pass. So there you go.
Good old days.
Yeah.
Good old days of passing out in puddles.
Love it. I love that for you.
Well,
you passed two ways that day.
Whoa.
Hey.
Look at me.
So good.
Well, I'm a little disappointed that it sounds like I got to go back to the drawing board with my motivational discussion think piece on how to use my special TA I wrote for filling out a planner. I got to take that back to the drawing board. It's not going to get accepted.
I love my planner, though. I do love my planner.
But everything else we talked about was super illuminating, very, very interesting, and a lot of fun. So Dr. Natalie Andzik and Dr. Mike Kranak, thank you so much for coming on the show today and sharing what we know about supervision, which is some, but not as much as maybe we thought we knew or wanted to know. And there's still more to learn, which is good. I think it's better to know you don't know everything, right? If folks want to hear more about either the research that you're currently publishing on supervision or any of the other areas that you publish on, is there a great way they could reach out to you?
They are more than welcome to email me, kranak@oakland.edu, or they could check, just like and subscribe. Follow me on ResearchGate, LinkedIn. I'll post articles there and that. My students have recently made a Instagram for the Cat Lab. So follow the Cat Lab on Instagram if y'all are so hip with those things.
Cool.
Yeah. I'm going to say...
KAT?
Yeah.
Is that right?
KAT, yes, the Kranak Applied and Translational Lab. So Cat _lab, I think, or OU, something to that effect. Y'all will get it.
Very cute.
Yes, I prefer carrier pigeon, message in a bottle via Pacific Ocean, and if either of those are not currently in your repertoire, email Andzik, ANDZIK @NIU.edu. That's Northern Illinois University. That's the best way. I'm never leaving. I'm going to be here forever and ever for the rest of my life. So you'll always be able to find me on that email.
Same.
I feel you.
We're in our body bag jobs.
Yeah.
Yep, I am too.
Yeah.
I love that.
We want to give one more big thanks to Dr. Michael Kranak and Dr. Natalie Andzik for being on the show. We had a lot of fun talking about supervision. I think their style of sharing their research was one that we just had a blast, and we hope you had a blast listening to them discuss all of the work they've been doing in this area. So thanks to them again. But we've got one more section of the show before we wrap things up, and that is pairings. Diana, take it away.
Sure thing. Pairings is the part of the show where I tell you about past episodes you might want to check out if you liked this one. Here today, I'm just going to highlight for everyone the many, many episodes that we have had during Supervision September, because I think I went back. I think we've been doing this since 2018. So maybe not the very first year, but after that, it all
starts to blend together.
Yeah, something like that. So you could go back and check out episodes 38, 39, and 40, 63, 64, and 65. One of those was with Dr. Jamie Hughes-Lika. 97, 98, and 99. One of those was with Dr. Amy Henley. I'm doing bad here. 140 and 141, which is where we discussed bringing out the best in people. 142, 177 and 178, which is where we discuss crucial conversations. 179, and then 252 and 253. That one was with Kim Held. 277, 278, and even more. Those are just the ones that were during supervision, but there's also like errant supervision episodes that pop up every now and again that weren't part of that series. And then I also just want to highlight a couple that came up in the conversation today topically, but were not supervision episodes. But you could also circle back and check out episode 199, which was Self-Care and Modern Day Burnout with Dr. Julie Sloviak. And you could also check out episode 221, which is where Ryan Atkinson joined us to talk about one of those supervision articles that was actually about intervention
articles
and how to teach fieldwork requirements to supervisees. I think that's correct.
Mm-hmm. If you can't remember all those numbers, you can also go to the website, abainsidetrack.com, and go to previous episodes. You go to the section that says supervision, and it lists all of our supervision episodes that we've ever done. So all of those are in one nice little box.
Correct. Oh, yeah. We also like to recommend a snack during our pairing section to enjoy. The snack today is lasagna and garlic bread, because in Jackie is my discussion before we started recording this episode, we had both pre-prepped the same meal to eat for dinner after this episode, and that's what the meal is. So maybe you are having that too at home.
I remember when you first pitched this section, it was a thematically appropriate food.
I don't know. I couldn't think of anything.
I feel like it's turned into, and by the way, the following is served for dinner.
Sometimes I do.
Podcast.
Sometimes it's related.
I like a theme. I like themed food. I'm a big fan of themed food.
Fine. Then hers is a veggie lasagna, and mine has turkey in it. And you can put a lot of different things into the lasagna. Might involve some different sort of, personalities, different components. But when you cook it all together, it ends up being really satisfying for everyone involved. And that's how the supervision process should go.
Okay.
So there.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Diana. You didn't say please enjoy, though.
That was pairings. Please enjoy.
There it is. All right. Well, thanks everyone so very much for listening. Thanks again to our special guests, Dr. Kranak, Dr. Andzik. If you liked ABA Inside Track, we'd appreciate it if you left us a review. If you didn't like it, feel free to leave a review as well. You can leave that wherever you subscribe, Apple Podcasts, or whatever your podcast player of choice may be. You can find us online at abainsidetrack.com, where you can find links to all of the articles we discussed, as well as all of our previous episodes on supervision. You can get even more ABA Inside Track content on patreon.com/ABA Inside Track, where you can subscribe at any level. You can subscribe at the $5 and up level to get access to all of our listener choice episodes for free CE, just for being a member, to also get to vote in all of the polls we do on the books we read and our listener choice topics. We have one that's out, should be out right now, or maybe just closed. So we'll have another one in a few months where you, the listener, gets to pick the topic. And if you want to subscribe at the $10 and up level, you get access to all of our book clubs and the 2 CEs that come with listening to those for no additional charge. So if you're saying, you know what, I want to listen to some of those old supervision book discussions, well, that might be a good time to sign up. So you can get all of those episodes as well as our newer book clubs for no additional charge to get those CEs. And you've also got Oops by Aubrey Daniels, 13 Supervisory Mistakes, that we will be doing for this September's book club. And while everyone gets that book club, usually we lock the new book clubs up. Supervision, we don't, but you still get those 2 supervision CEs for no additional charge if you are a patron of ours. So we want to say thanks. That's patreon.com/ABA Inside Track. And of course, you can always email us, abainsidetrack@gmail.com. Some final thanks. are to Dr. Jim Carr for recording our intro and outro music, Kyle Sturry for interstitial music, and Dan Thabit of the Podcast Doctors for his amazing editing work. And before we go, you might want your last secret code word. I put it here, so you have to listen to all the fun plugs and thanks. You can't skip through those if you want your code words. And the last code word we have, again from our special guests, Labrador, Labrador. It is a type of dog, a Labrador. That's all I got to say about that one. We'll be back next week with, I think, kind of the wrap up of our Supervision September, which means it'll be a fun-filled episode. But until then, keep responding. Bye.
Bye.